Okay, so this slide shows what happens from the time that the egg is released from the ovaries to the time that the embryo implants in the uterus of the female. So let's take a look at that. Remember that the egg gets released during ovulation. After it gets released, it enters the fallopian tube where it gets fertilized and becomes the zygote. Okay. For the next few days, that zygote is going to undergo a series of cell divisions to give rise to a structure called the blastocyst. This is what the blastocyst looks like. So you have like an inner cell mass surrounded by this kind of hollow ball of cells. So this kind of middle part is hollow, and you have this kind of sphere of cells on the outside of it. That blastocyst is then going to burrow into the endometrium and implant there. Okay, so that whole process takes about a week. Now let's take a look at what happens from there. So after the blastocyst implants, the cell mass that was in the blastocyst, so this part of the blastocyst, is going to become the embryo and some of the surrounding membranes. Okay, so we end up with an embryo that's surrounded by some membranes. Those membranes have those membranes have amniotic fluid in them, so the embryo is developing in this like suspended in amniotic fluid. Okay. Um, that cell mass also, a part of that cell mass also develops into this yolk sac right here, which provides some nutrition to the baby as the placenta develops. Okay. I also want to say that part of that outer layer of cells that were part of this blastocyst, those become the outermost layer of membranes surrounding the baby. That's the chorion. Okay, so we have basically three membranes around the baby: the amnion, the allantois, which is not shown or not labeled, and then the chorion. And together, those make up the placenta. Okay, so the placenta is basically the interface with the mother. So we have the placenta interfacing with the inside of the uterine wall of the mother here. Okay, and the embryo is going to exchange materials with the placenta, or not really exchange, but transport materials back and forth to the placenta via the umbilical cord. Okay. Taking a closer look at the placenta and its interface with the uterine wall, this is what it looks like. Okay, so remember that the umbilical cord is going to be bringing materials into and out from the placenta. The placenta forms these finger-like projections called chorionic villi, okay, which sort of kind of dig in to the uterine wall, which is right here. Okay. So this is the uterine wall. They're going to like sort of dig into the uterine wall and actually break the blood vessels of the mother. Okay. So they're going to break the blood vessels of the mother and release the blood into kind of the extracellular fluid here. Okay. And then from there, materials are just going to diffuse. Most materials are going to diffuse across the membranes into and out of the embryo slash fetus's blood supply. Okay. So that's most materials. Some materials actually do need to be transported using transporters. Okay. All right. I think that's all I have to say for this slide. Oh, one more thing, about 10% of the maternal cardiac output goes to the placenta. I would say not really the placenta, but kind of the uterine wall where it gets exchanged, where materials get exchanged with the placenta. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look at how pregnancy is maintained. So I want to remind you that in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, we have high estrogen and progesterone levels. Okay, those are coming from the corpus luteum. remember that if we don't have a pregnancy, then the corpus luteum is going to die and estrogen and progesterone levels are going to drop. So here's a question for you. Let's see if you can remember or think about what's going to happen if estrogen and progesterone levels drop. Think about that for a second. Okay, so hopefully you remember if estrogen and progesterone levels drop, as they do when we don't get a pregnancy, right? So our corpus luteum dies, we lose our estrogen and progesterone. Remember that progesterone is responsible for maintaining the endometrium as a secretory structure. If we don't have that, then we enter menses and we restart the menstrual period. Okay, so that's fine if you don't get pregnant, but if you do get pregnant and you want to maintain the pregnancy, that would be a terrible thing, right? We don't want to lose our endometrium. We want to maintain it as a secretory structure. Therefore, we're going to need to continue to secrete estrogen and progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. Okay, so let's take a look at how that happens. Basically, that the placenta takes on the job of maintaining the pregnancy by secreting hormones. So early in pregnancy, the placenta is going to be secreting a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. HCG is going to basically act like the gonadotropins, LH and FSH, and it's going to tell the corpus luteum to continue to make estrogen and progesterone so that the pregnancy can be maintained and the endometrium can be maintained. Okay. There we go. Later in pregnancy, the placenta itself takes over the job of secreting progesterone and estrogen, so that we can, again, maintain that endometrium and continue to support the pregnancy. Okay. By the way, pregnancy tests work by detecting HCG. So HCG is the actual molecule that gets detected in a pregnancy test. Okay. Oh, and also, by the way, later in pregnancy is about 2 or 3 months in. Okay, last slide. We're going to close by talking about parturition, or the birth process. Okay, so when the fetus is ready to be born, what happens is it will drop within the mother's uterus. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the mother kind of lying on her back. Here are her vertebrae. This is her vaginal opening down here. This is the fetus inside of the uterus. Okay, so the fetus drops inside of the uterus and it pushes on the cervix. Okay, that cervical stretch is going to stimulate the release of a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to cause the uterine wall to contract. So remember that we have that myometrium layer, that muscle layer of the uterine wall. That's going to be the one that contracts to kind of push the fetus out. So it's going to push the baby against the cervix. As we get more cervical stretch, that's going to stimulate more oxytocin release. That's going to lead to more uterine contractions, which is then going to push the baby against the cervix some more. And that is just going to continue again and again until the baby is finally born, basically until the cervix dilates enough to let the baby through, so that it can exit the female's body. As you may remember, we went over this the first day of class, or the first set of videos, when we were talking about positive feedback loops. So this is a positive feedback loop. Remember that the event that's going to stop the positive feedback loop is the delivery of the baby. Okay, so that basically brings us full circle back to the first day of class. That is the end of the material for this semester. I hope you enjoyed taking this class. I will see you in class, and good luck with the rest of the semester, with finals and everything. Thank you for watching.